Music theory with Microsoft Excel. Intervals over an octave in distance. Get ready and some coffee because you ain't never seen rockin' unless you excel at rockin', for which you need Microsoft Excel. In Excel. If you don't have access to this workbook, that's okay because we basically built this from a blank worksheet but started in a prior presentation. So if you want to build this entire worksheet from a blank sheet, you could begin back there or just build the part of the worksheet that we're currently working on. If you do have access to this workbook though, 4 tabs down below: fretboard, example, practice, blank. The fretboard tab having a simulated fretboard that we will refer back to. The example tab having the finished product, in essence the answer key. The practice tab has pre-formatted cells, so you could practice the practice problem with less Excel formatting. But if you don't have any of that, that's okay because we'll be continuing to work in the blank tab where we started from scratch from a blank worksheet, and we'll be continuing to work in essence the blank part of the worksheet, practicing both our Excel formatting skills and music skills at the same time. Let's go on over to the fretboard tab, remembering what we are doing, looking at interval terminology, noting that's one of the key problem areas within music theory because it uses a scale degree system, forcing us into problematic contentions over how we would like to optimally visualize the fretboard, which is as a map of the territory, like the globe, having 7 destination locations on it, 5 non-destination locations similar to the oceans on the globe that we go through in order to get to the destination locations, and our head in space over above the low or heavy E string, the one closest to the ceiling here, looking down on the fretboard world, notes that the fretboard spins around to the right here. We're going to be naming 12 degrees of rotation, those being the names in the musical alphabet, typically working in the collection of notes around the key of C major. But if we chose C sharp, D sharp, and so on, the whole continent would be pushing to the right. This whole thing would push to the right. And therefore, once we've looked at the degree of visualization, I no longer want to visualize primarily by note names, but rather by absolute modal names, Nashville number system names, or Ionian, Phrygian, Lydian, and so on and so forth. So I also do not want to visualize the continents by relative positions, which is what we're forced to do with scale degree terminology, which is in the chord creations as well as in just normal distance kind of counting. So in other words, if I'm on this mixolydian and I want to go up 4 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, it has a distance of 4. The term typically is a major third. The major third doesn't tell us how many notes up that we are going. That's kind of a problem. We have to just basically know that that is how far we are going, and it forces us into a scale degree, which would mean that I'd have to think about this as the 1, where I want to keep thinking about this as a 5 and look at it from a distance perspective. So we talked about some ideas on how we can at least unhinge our mind from being forced into that scale degree logic, which is going to force us out of the optimal way to visualize the fretboard, which is through a nodal center kind of system. And the scale degrees don't really have a great system for when I go in the negative direction. That's a problem. So we had to deal with inverses and negative directionality. Now we have the idea, well, what if I'm going up past an octave? Then, because most of the distances we're talking about are as though we're going around a clock face in clockwise rotation. But if I'm going a distance further than 12 notes, like 5, 10, and then 11, 12, 13, right? Or this would be 5, 10, 11, 12, 12 notes up here, or 12, 13, 14 notes up. What am I going to call that? If I go from here to here, what am I going to call that? So that's going to be the thing we want to look at this point in time, noting that most people would like to call it something similar to if I was going from here to here, which would be a 2 note away. We would say like a major second or something like that from a scale degree terminology. But really, I didn't go 2 notes away. I went over 12 notes away. I went 12 plus 2. So how do we want to basically visualize that in our mind to optimize the idea that we're still going from basically a G note to an A note, but we're not going 2 notes away, we're going an octave up. All right, that given the idea, remember our general idea in terms of our continents. This is position or fretboard 5 to 8, where we usually would finger here, 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 boom, 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 5, 7, 8, 5, 7, 8, and then 5, 7. And in the middle are what we're going to say are the oceans. Now, if I map that around in a circle as though we're going around the block, noting that if I go from like this 3 around to this 6, then how could I count that? Well, I could count by the continents. 1, 2, 3 continents up. I would call that 3 modal half steps. Or scale degree, making that the 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, scale degree. Or by the actual continents and oceans involved. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which would be equivalent to the note distance. I could also go backwards, which is the problem that we don't really have a system for in our normal naming convention. In other words, I can go 1, 2, 3, 4 continents or modal half steps backwards. I could count it as a scale degree, this being the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -5 scale degree, but we don't typically do that. We have to use kind of inverse intervals. We talked about that in a prior presentation. Note that I can also think about going all the way around in a circle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, saying it's 10 notes away because I went around in the circle and then back here again, because that would be simulating the octave, remembering that this rotation in clockwise rotation is good visualization. We can also memorize or visualize a note number line that goes infinitely forwards and backwards, but truly what happens is we have more of a spiral thing, meaning there's repetition octave-wise, but it also goes infinitely up and down pitch-wise, and so that's what we have to contend with at this point in time. All right, let's go to the blank tab over here, and let's try to clean this up first. I'm going to unhide everything that we have thus far, so I'm going to go from J all the way to AM, right-click, and unhide where we left off last time. We're building a complex table. I understand that. It's confusing, but we're going to make it easy as possible by hiding cells, and I highly recommend getting good at this. Home tab, font group, let's make this blue, because because these things are real, right? You want to be able to analyze this stuff, and tables are the way to do it. I'm sorry for people that don't like tables. I get it. But you should like tables because they're the best way to do it. It's just the best way to look at this stuff, all right? There's no getting around it. There's no getting around it. All right, so then let's go ahead and hide. I'm going to hide this column. I'm going to hide the inverse column. I'm going to hide the intervals column. I'm going to hide this abbreviation column. And let's hide those for now. Let's right-click and hide those. All right, so now we've got the intervals, and then let's hide the mirror interval. I don't need that right now. Let's hide the inverse, and let's hide the modal half steps. I'm not going to deal with that. So right click and let's hide all of that stuff. All right. So we're gonna then I'm not gonna worry about the negative directionality right now. We're going to go in the positive direction down here. So I'm wondering if I can hide. Before we hide that, possibly hiding that, let's first remember that we're looking at the 12 notes in the musical alphabet. We're pulling out 7 of them in the key of C, but it would be the same for all other keys, relative positions. We can name them modally, thusly, and absolute positions 1 through 7. So the idea here being that if I'm on like the Dorian and I go from the Dorian to the Lydian, I could go 2 modal half steps forward, but I could also go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 modal half steps forward, or from a scale degree, if I made that the 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? A 10th scale degree. So most people don't talk in like 10th scale degrees, but in a textbook, you will see that. So we'll introduce that idea and we'll talk more about it later. I can also think about that same concept note-wise. So if I'm on this D and I go to the Y, it's going to be 1, 2, 3 notes up, right? But I could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 notes up, which would be an octave, 12 plus 3. So when I go an octave up, then the question is, how do I want to basically name that? Because I could give the total distance, or I could use the term octave, but I'd like to keep the same terminology of saying, hey, look, it's similar to a 3-note away from a pitch perspective, because that preserves kind of like the flavor. And on a guitar in particular, that's what you'll typically hear, right? You're not usually going to hear different names for different octaves of different intervals. You're going to memorize the shapes and get the basic flavor of it, although you do want to get more detailed to understand when the distance is more than like a 3-note away for a major third and so on. So that's the general idea. Let's try to hide from 4 down to 13, which is going to lose this for us, and we might have to unhide that later, but right now I'll hide that. All right, so now we're going to say, if we were going to look at all the intervals, we've got 1 through 11 intervals. If we're only going clockwise and we're only going 1 octave. Now we want to introduce the idea that I could keep going, right? I could keep going to 12, 13, so these would be the steps up. We only have naming conventions right now for these intervals up within 1 octave. So let's keep on going, and I'm going to go all the way up to, let's start one at a time. Let's go to 23 first. So I'm going to go up to 23, and 24 would be the next octave. So I'm going to go up to 23. So now this would be the next series of steps. I'm going to go Home tab, and let's make that green and bordered. So we'll make it green and bordered. So now we'd go up stepwise. We can go up, hold on a second. Why did I start at a 3 here? Something's happening. Something funny's happening. Let's unhide again. Unhide, and I want to hide from here to here. Right click and hide. Okay, so we could go from stepwise up through 11, and then when we get to 12, we're basically starting over if you think about a clock face, but at the same time, we're also still going up pitch-wise. So then the question is, well, what am I going to call that? Now, I'd still like to call it something like an octave up for the normal condition of the formatting. Or if I'm on this one, this is a 1-note away major second. What would I call that one down here? I'd still like to preserve the idea of a major second, because that kind of gives me the flavor. But if someone just says major second, they're not giving you the actual distance in notes. My other option from a scale degree standpoint is to continue counting the scale degrees past 7. So if I go through the 7th scale degree, I can keep on counting up to 8, 9, and so on and so forth. Now, in a textbook, you will see that, right? You'll see something like that. So if I had what I would call a 4-note away major third, for example, and let's say you added an octave, it would be 12 plus 4. It would be a 16-note away major third, but they would call that like a major 10, right? Because now we'd be going past a 7 plus 3, a major 10, and you'd have to then figure out that it would be 10 minus 7 to get to some kind of third, and then realize that the distance is 16, or 4 notes plus 12, to figure out it's a major third. Now, realize that is a very messy way to do it, because the thing that's important is the actual distance in half steps, right? So if I tell someone it's a major 10, it's not really what people often hear in a guitar. So we'll look at that possibly in a future presentation. I'm going to do what's most likely more common that you will hear, and that is just simply still call it a major third, and you'll look at it shape-wise. But I would like to be more specific as well and be able to say something like, instead of saying it's a 4-note away major third, I would say it's a 4 plus an octave, or 4 plus 12 major third. Remember, most people don't say the number of half steps. I recommend doing that so that you can still see the flavor as a major third, but you can also say whether it's an octave away. You'll start to give more definition if you're looking at distances and shapes on the fretboard, to name the different shapes as a 4-note away major third versus a 4 plus an octave away major third, or you might call it a 16 note away major third. So that gives, right, see, that gives you a different, you can see that it's a similar flavor, but it's different, right? And so you want both of those things. I think that's easier to say than what you don't typically hear, particularly on the guitar, which is a major 10, which you could say, but then you have to memorize the fact that the major 10 is like the major third and so on and so forth. And it'd be easier to label the distance, which is what most people do in normal music. If you ask them for more detail, if someone just says major third when they're holding something down and say, well, what's the distance? Could you give me more detail on that? Well, it's an octave away major third. It's a 16 note away major third. All right. So I'm gonna try to do this by saying this one's gonna be a 12 note away perfect first. And note, you might call that an octave up, or you might call it like an 8, a perfect 8 or something like that. But I'm going to try to keep the name the same and indicate that I'm an octave up as the general rule by the distance, 12 notes away, or you could just say plus an octave or something like that. Now, I'd like to be able to do that with a formula. So the question is, how can I do that with a formula? So I want to be able to pull this over. I want to be able to pull the perfect first, but I want 12 in front of it instead of 0. So I have to pull, I'm going to get fancy with the formulas here. I want to pull the last part of this one and then that 12. So what I'm going to do is let's first try to get the last part. I'm going to say this equals the right. So I'm going to pull something from the right side of this formula, the right side of that, comma, and then it says how many characters. I want 2 characters. Pull 2 characters from the right. That's not a 2. That's a 2. That's not a knife. This is a knife. So there it is. So now I just need to add this 12 in front of it. So I'm going to double click on this and say this is going to be this 12, and then I'm going to put an and between them because that will tie them together. So that gives me a 12 note away perfect first. Now if I copy that down, we get a 13 note away minor second. So if I'm looking at a distance of a minor second shape, but it's not 1 note away, but it's 13 notes away, which is going to be 1 plus 12. I could say it's a major second octave up, right? Or it's a 1 note away plus 12 or plus octave minor second. Or you could just like the distance of 13. But I would try to list it out when you're learning the shapes on the guitar. Find the method that works for you. I would say the distance would be a good way to do it. You might say the distance is like this one. You might say it's a 3 plus 12 minor third, right? A 3 plus, wait, this is a major second. 3 plus 12 major second. 2 plus 12 major second, or a 14 note away major second, right? Because again, that gives you some distinction, not just memorizing the shapes arbitrarily, but it tells you the distance, which again, guitarists are not really good at doing, right? So this is a minor third. So you have a 3 note away minor third up here. So 3 plus 12 note away minor third, or 3 plus octave minor third, or 15 note away minor third. That allows you to actually count the distance between the notes, which is useful because that allows you to verify that you're doing what you think you're doing. So this one's got a 16 note away major third, right? So here's the major third, which is typically 4 notes away. So if I hear major third, I'm thinking 4 notes away. So I should say something like it's a major, like you could say a major 10, but again, that's kind of a cruel way to do it, right? The easier way to do it is to say, no, it's a 4 note away plus an octave, right? It's an octave higher major third. It's going to be a 16 note away major third, because that tells you the distance first and then the flavor that is a result of that distance, right? And so that, I think that's the best way to do it. It's under the current system. And then you have a 17 note away perfect fourth. So normally when we see perfect fourth, we're thinking 5 note away. So it's 5 plus 12, which would be a 17 note away perfect fourth. And then we're going to say it's an 18 note away diminished fifth, and so on and so forth. So we can go then to the 19 note away, perfect fifth, 20 note away, minor 6, 21 note away, major 6, 22 note away, minor 6, and 23 note away, major 7. Now, on a guitar, one more octave up is typically as far as we typically will go. You can go higher than that like on a piano, but let's continue on to 24, which would be another octave up to 25. And let's copy that down to 35. Let's go down to 35. Okay, so now we've got a similar process. Let's make this one back to blue. So I'll border it and we'll make it blue. Okay, so then if we continued this down, does it do the right thing? It's gonna make this a 24, but then it's still okay because it's pulling 2 to the right. So now it's starting over again. Instead of pulling from up here, it's pulling it over here. It's pulling 2 from the right and 24. So now we're going 2 octaves up. So if I go another one down, we're gonna say it's a 25 note away major or minor second. So here's the minor second, which is 1 note away plus 2 octaves, or 1 note away plus 12 and 12, 24 is gonna get us 25. So that distance is gonna be messy to kind of get your mind around, but saying the distance in some way, shape, or form will help you. When you map it out on the guitar, you'll be able to count out the distance between the notes and see the difference between the distance if it's just 1 octave versus 2 octaves. And there's only really two octaves up that you might go like on a guitar, and then we'll also think about it the other way, going 2 octaves down later. So I'm going to make this one green. Let's make this green and bordered, and then we'll make this blue. Now, what if I'm going to use the current system or the new system I'm proposing here, and let's say that we're going to say it's a modal range. How can we add to a modal range terminology the distance of something greater than an octave? So in other words, if I'm going to an IN modal range, I'm going from the I to the N modal range, to if I'm going forward down to here, but now I'm going another octave up. So it'd be all the way down to another octave up, right? So I could do something like, if it was a modal range, let's say it would be an II. I'm going to say it's an II and 12, right? So it's going to be an II and 12, let's say. And then we can go here and say, all right, the modal range is going from 1 to 1, but now there's a distance of 12, so I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to say this is going to be equal to let's do this, it's going to be a 1 to 1, and then I'm going to say and 12. I'm putting and instead of a plus because we used a plus for something else. I don't want an equal sign, I just want that, all right? And then, so that's going to be that, and then the distance that we're going to want is going to be something like, it's a 0 I0, so we want to have something like a 12 I0. Now, I'm doing the same kind of thing where I'm saying it's a 12 note distance from the I node, and here when I put a 0, note, just like with the scale degrees, I could keep on going up because I'm thinking that I'm doing modal half steps. So I'm going modal half steps up this way, right? Modal half steps up, and I could keep continuing the modal half steps around in a circle, and that would be consistent. But just like over here, I think it's easier to try to keep the same name as though you're within 1 octave, because that helps you to see the flavor a little bit more easily. So I'll do both options in another table. I'm going to do what I think is the more easy way, this way, from a playing perspective. And then I'll show you the other way, which is similar to what we have over here. In other words, this is the way that I think most actual guitar players say it. They don't even say the distance. They just say the interval, and they kind of ignore whether the fact that it's within 1 octave or above it. And then if pressed, they're going to tell you the distance in notes. They're not going to call it they're not going to call it something like I say a major 16. They're not going to say it's a 16 note away major or major 10, right? That's not typically what they're going to say. Similarly here, if you're using this system, I think it's easiest to tell the notes to give you the distance, and then keep the modal half step term the same as though it was in one octave, because that helps you more easily identify the flavor. But it would be more mathematically consistent if we used both of these terms as though they keep on going upwards. So we'll show another table to show you how that works as well. So I'll continue with this across here for all of these ones in the next presentation.